Alex Boudrias, and this is the Bannock and Tea Time podcast, brought to you by First Nation Housing Professional Association, also known as FNHPA. Today I have Darlene Marshall, who sits on the board as our chair. Thanks, Darlene, for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me here today.
For sure. So the point of this podcast is that we would like to sit down with housing professionals who can share their stories, their experiences, and their knowledge. So just to start off, we would like a basic introduction of who you are and how did you start your career in First Nation housing?
Well, my name is Darlene Marshall. I'm from the Eskasoni First Nation in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and in Mi'kma'ki. I started my career in housing probably in 1987. I started out as a clerk, actually. I applied for a job when jobs were scarce at that time, and just like in any other First Nation. And I actually just grew right into it. I loved what I was doing. Housing was so challenging, and I'm still there, and I am now the director.
The director of housing?
Yes.
For your community?
Yep, for Eskasoni.
So for our listeners who are new to the world of First Nation housing, what does a housing director do?
Oh, you know, when I think about that, it's really difficult to answer because I'm not just the housing director. So when it comes to all the different roles that I, just like anybody else in the First Nation community that is basically the jack of all trades, when you try to just target one position, it really, you really have to put some thought into that. As housing director, I actually oversee and manage the program. I oversee my staff as well. I'm going to start with the staff. Protecting them as their well-being is my number one priority because they are the base, and they're the ones that actually run the department. And same with my community members. I'm there for them. Infrastructure. We talk about new construction. We have to talk about budgeting. We have to plan. I do a 3-year plan. I have to think about all these other things to make our housing department successful in providing units for our people. Not only units, but we're there to protect the health and safety of them as well.
For sure. So you've been in the world of First Nation housing for over 30 years. Okay, I'm pretty sure you've seen a lot of things, experienced a lot of things. Can you tell us what is one of the more unique challenges that are presented to you as housing director?
I don't think this is unique, but I think that when people ask about challenges as being a housing director, I think it has to do with when you're first starting out and you're young, you're not really taken seriously, especially if you're a woman. And for years, I felt as if they didn't understand or fully comprehend what I could bring to the table. But now that I'm at a certain age, that has turned around. And that's been my challenge. You're a woman in a man's world, and even contractors, for example, they never took you seriously as if you knew what you were talking about, or you in regards to housing, until you go to the job site and you're like, boom, 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 and they're like, okay, and that's really half the battle, especially being a female in a male-dominant area.
What's the term? Breaking the glass ceiling. You did it.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Yeah. Okay. Can you share an example of a successful collaboration or partnership that has positively impacted housing outcomes?
The first thing that comes to my mind would probably be in 2009 when they had the Canada Economic Action Plan that came out. Prior to that, my community, we had a governance they didn't want to change the status quo. They just wanted to build family homes. And every time you brought up transitional housing or you brought up apartments, they would shoot it right down. So what I did was, when that came out, there was certain criteria that you had to meet.
Yeah.
And working with my band manager at the time, we set in the criteria, well, it has to be only single parents, single mothers. What I did was I got the money from IS to build an apartment building.
Okay.
And I only put 1 meter in there.
Oh.
So they couldn't put anybody that was employed there to make sure that it was a social home for single mothers. I kept it within that criteria. And once that was built and it was occupied, and they're not small, like the units are like 1,060 square feet. I mean, they're huge. They're 3-bedroom apartments.
Lots of
and
space.
it really changed that mindset and the outcome. And now we build a lot more apartments
Wow.
Since then.
That's great.
And, and when we look at that, we are building 1-bedroom apartments, 2-bedroom. We're actually bridging that gap where people were falling through the cracks and not being housed.
Okay. I just need a little clarification. What does transitional home mean? What is a transitional home?
So it's no different from a person owning an apartment and then they feel that they're ready to move into a home.
Okay.
We have a lot of people that want a house, but they're not actually ready, or they wouldn't fit the criteria of a big family home. They don't, so that's where I feel that some people really need that first step, because we never want to set anybody up to fail.
Okay.
It's challenging, and as I tell my staff, you don't work for the chief and council, you work for your community.
Mm-hmm.
And you and only you can look at yourself in the face and you in the mirror and you know what you've done for them. It doesn't matter what they say, because they're negative as hell anyway, but
Yeah. Could you tell us about any milestones that you've experienced and would like to share with us?
Yeah, I could think of 2 of them. Working in First Nation communities is always challenging.
Yeah.
And you could start something and have to go back to it over and over again until you finally get something passed, or that is accepted within the community. So I think my first one, I started our housing policy way back in 1994, the first time. And after a couple, so many revisions, in 2019, finally leadership approved it and it is no longer in draft. And it's such a milestone, and it was just so good to have that approved, and it felt like we accomplished something.
For sure.
The second one, all these years I've been really promoting home ownership as the housing director for our community. And finally, the past couple of years, we've had a real uptake on that, and it's such a proud moment for me, because I see young community members encouraged, they're so excited, they want to build their own home, and they're doing it.
Yeah.
Where they were used to be afraid to do so, but I'm just so happy that finally with the, we talked about collaboration and what's provided by our partners, and IS finally listened, and they supported us and by supplying an incentive for people to go on the home ownership route, and it's not flourished as much as I would like to have seen, but now you're hearing community members talk, well, how can I do this? And I'm hoping that it'll keep that
Baby
momentum
steps.
will keep going.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
One step at a time.
Yeah, so those are milestones for me.
Oh, for sure. And I can imagine how these new homeowners must feel that proudness of, I have a home. This is my home.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's amazing. Yeah. So Darlene, just to end on a light note, I would like to know, what's your #1 dream for FNHPA moving forward?
As a founding board member and listening to housing managers across the country and our think tank session, and just even myself starting out, thinking back over the course of my career, my dream for FNHPA is to be that go-to place, for everybody. It doesn't necessarily have to be just for housing.
Yeah.
I mean, because housing is linked to every department within their own individual communities. So I think that for resources, information, network, I think that FNHPA can provide that.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you very much for taking the time today to sit down with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the annual conference. Let's have some tea and Bannock. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A conversation between 2 friends.
Okay.
That's what we're trying for. Okay. We good? Do I restart from the top?
Yes.
Marshall, who is
Okay.
That would be me.
looking at me.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So we want to see our beautiful faces, so is your cups okay?
Yeah.
Hi, Darlene. Thanks for having me here.